Hey, welcome back to Sparking Innovation. We're excited to kick off season 2 of this podcast from Provisio, the largest Salesforce implementation partner dedicated solely to human services organizations. I'm Tom Moran, and today's episode is all about the accidental Salesforce admin. And lots of people will probably relate to this term, but let me just break it down for you really quickly. Nonprofits don't usually have the luxury of hiring a dedicated Salesforce administrator, right? I mean, in fact, more often than not, the Salesforce admin duties get handed to someone who was hired for a completely different role in the first place. And this person then gets to take on some people might call it an exciting opportunity. Some people might call it a burden of managing the organization's Salesforce instance, without really maybe the proper title or even the training or perhaps the time to really dedicate to do it. And that has huge stakes, right? Because when an accidental admin is overwhelmed or under supported, it ultimately results in inconsistent data that hurts the mission. And nobody wants that. So today we're going to talk about the realities of being an accidental admin and how people in that position can set themselves up for success and their organizations up for success. Because at Provisio, we know that after working with hundreds of human services organizations, the most successful Salesforce transformations aren't just about building the new features. It's really about building the capacity inside the organization to sustain them as well long term. And so today, I'm really excited to have two guests join us with really unique perspectives and direct life experiences that apply to this. One is Pete Schweiss, Director of Technology Services at Hope Ignites, which is a college and career readiness organization that serves more than 1,200 young people across the U.S. and Latin America. And Provisio is proud to be a partner in their mission. And also joining us is Blaine Cowart, Provisio Project Manager and our resident change management expert, who's joined us before. And thank you again for hopping on. So welcome to the pod.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks,
Great to
Tom.
be here.
Yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. How did each of you become an accidental Salesforce admin, and what was your experience? Pete, let's start with you.
Sure. So I joined the ecosystem or started my accidental admin story 7 years ago. I started in a support role here at Hope Ignites. Back then we were Boys Hope, Girls Hope. I had been in a volunteer capacity with our organization for 15-ish years before that. So I got hired into a support role. It was never really a come own Salesforce role. It was come help us support adoption, was really what the goal of the job was, across multiple platforms, not just Salesforce. And this was several months before the pandemic. And then when the pandemic hit and the world turned upside down, so did the role that I was in. And that's kind of really where the accidental admin era started, is this, hey, we got to go digital. We have paper processes. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. What are we going to do? So I said to my boss at the time, I said, we own Salesforce. We're already invested. I don't, I know what it can do, kind of. I know that it can do whatever you want it to do if you know how to make it work, right? So that's kind of where the accidental admin kind of, let's just figure it out. We'll tackle one problem at a time, and pull these manual or paper processes in. And that was really kind of the tipping point. But I was never hired to do this. I knew we used Salesforce because I was on the committee as a volunteer that talked about using Salesforce, but I didn't take the role knowing I was going to support Salesforce. So that was kind of how it all started. And it was a mixture of, can Salesforce do this? Oh my gosh, what are we going to do with this paper process that we have? How are we going to engage this group of people digitally? And Salesforce kept answering that question, along with plugins, integrations, etc. Right. Um, but I think the interesting thing is Tom, you ask about my accidental admin story, and this is kind of where I earned my badge. But the wild thing to me, not knowing much about the ecosystem at the time, was I didn't do this alone. I have a team. Have a team of people here that don't report to me, that are just my colleagues that are all way smarter, right? Um, when this all started, I knew I could make the tech happen. I knew I could build viable digital solutions, but I knew I wasn't the smartest person in the room by a long shot. And I knew that we had to bring the real brains in to say, I can make a tech process work. How does your business work, right? What is your process? So the people that really allowed me to succeed as an accidental admin were these subject matter experts we have across all of our different domains. They brought process knowledge to the table in a intelligent way, in a digestible way, and then it made my solutions look really good. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that they're really the reasons why I became an accidental admin and actually succeeded in doing it was that partnership.
Sure. And Blaine, what about you?
Pete, I just wanted to start by saying I absolutely love hearing your story because there's so many parallels, which is like the reason we're here today, right?
I
Is
love
that
it.
this is a story that's so common, much more common, I think, than sometimes we give it credit for. But just a little bit about me and how I fell into the accidental admin role in my previous life, as I like to call it. My background's in the nonprofit space. I spent my entire career working in nonprofit, but more specifically in the affordable housing space before coming on to sort of this side of things in the ecosystem. Um, and I spent the last decade or so before coming to Provisio working with Habitat for Humanity here in North Texas, where I'm based, and had the privilege of serving and really leading up their programmatic efforts. And so hearing you talk, P, about, all of our processes were on paper, we were doing everything manually. That was the life that that I lived for quite some time. And I think what really propelled me into this journey to begin with is just a genuine curiosity for learning about new technologies that could help our team do our jobs better and help us serve our beneficiaries better. And so that was really the genesis. And we learned about actually a managed package product that was available on Salesforce, but we didn't own Salesforce at the time. So my goal was, how do I convince our leadership that this is something worth investing in so I can get this product that I know will be a game changer for our affordable housing program teams? And it was a long time coming. I mean, we talked to that team for probably 3 or 4 years leading up until that point. And finally, our CEO, my boss at the time, came to me and said, I come from a sales background. Has anyone here ever considered a product like Salesforce? And I said, if you buy Salesforce, I will be your guinea pig. I will lead up this effort. Let me loose. I already know what we're going to buy, who we're going to work with. I'm ready. And so he did. He had the confidence, the trust in me and the team to do that. And that was such an incredible privilege. So my journey in was really actually serving as an executive sponsor at the beginning and just a champion for what this could do potentially for the organization. And what it led to was a multi-phase, multi-year implementation project with our implementation partner. And I had the privilege, of course, of leading phase one for that journey. So when we came out of that opportunity and we went live on the platform, then, of course, the $1 million question was, well, who's going to take care of things on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah.
Because we're so strategic and thinking ahead, of course, for all of these things. And so um, it naturally, I was millennial. I drank the Kool-Aid. I
Right.
used my, Ranger badge on Trailhead. And so naturally that fell to me. And so that was a really fun journey to go from ideation and from like inspiring the team of like, this is what could be, this is the art of the possible, to let's actually operationalize this and bring the vision to life, to now what does it look like to really invest in this long term? What do we need from a internal infrastructure perspective? And so it started with me. It didn't end with me. That's part of um, I think the exciting part of the journey that we'll dig into today. But it at the beginning was very much hands on the keyboard, lots of time in training, lots of time in Trailhead, lots of time just working through it with our partner and on my own time. And it was really exciting to think, Pete, to your point about how do you connect that dot between the technology and what it can do for you and the efficiency gains that exist in your organization, and how, like, more importantly, I think from our perspective, how you could do your job more effectively, how you can serve your community more effectively.
I want to go rogue on you for 1 second, Tom, because something Blaine said resonated. Outside of the accidental admin story, you mentioned your, a background in sales. Someone said, "Hey, have you tried Salesforce?" We had a very similar situation. We had a group of people from our board that all ended up accidentally being salespeople. That was not our intention, but they all said, Salesforce fundraising, selling stuff, it's not that far apart. because I think a lot of nonprofits are like less common maybe now, but back then it's like, why would a nonprofit need Salesforce? We don't sell anything, you know. So I think that's a very interesting parallel of like it really is more similar than you think. And in a lot of ways, you know, you can lean on all the same concepts.
Yeah. And so, tapping again into your personal experiences for both of you, what were the challenges and the things that you found like really hard about it in the beginning that probably other accidental admins would relate to? And then also what were the rewards and the things that you found really great about this like new role that you had been kind of tapped to do?
Sure. I'll go. I mean, the not knowing what you don't know, which ironically in this AI driven era where everything changes daily, we're kind of right back in the you don't know what you don't know space. But that was, I think, the hardest for me is like I know fundamentally it can be done. I know the tool can do it. I know there's ways to do it. Um, but how do you do that, right? Trailhead is great. You know, there's really Trailhead's great, YouTube, all that stuff. The community was really, really where I finally found the tools to succeed. It was, you know, I had the fundamentals, but then leaning into that community and really finding that like there is this group of people who like to talk about Salesforce and sometimes have beers and you know burgers while they're doing it. And I'm like that's my jam. That's my kind of people. So I think overcoming that was a mixture of learning and then leaning in and being a part of that community. And I think my organization also really supported it. We had a partner at the time and whatnot, and I went to my boss. I said, "Hey, this community is great. There's conferences. There's all this stuff." I said, "You know, you might learn 20% from a good conference session, but the people you meet, the conversation you have, the hallway conversation, I think is like equally, if not more valuable than sitting, you know, in a room and hearing something." And that's, I think those are our keys to success.
That's awesome. Yeah, Pete, I can relate to so much of what you described as well. I think like something that you really touched on that's such a critical piece of this puzzle for me is community, that sense of community and knowing that it's not just you. So even if you find yourself in an organization where it feels like it's just you, and that was me for a minute at a time of like, oh, everyone's just going to come to Blaine with all of her questions, and Blaine doesn't have all the answers to every question is knowing that you do have this like formal and informal community, right? So I was able to um, really be fortunate to surround myself by immersing myself both in, like we've talked about, trailhead resources, but also I had the opportunity to do on-site admin training. I had the awesome opportunity to go to Dreamforce and be able to learn and meet people in the ecosystem and see what other peers in the space were doing and other thought leaders were doing. And that really helped ignite of like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. Like you could use this platform for so many different things that we weren't even it was not even on our radar at the time. And so just bringing back sort of that inspiration of knowing like I can't do it all alone. We can't do it all alone, but we can bring in the right partnerships and the right community around us to be able to do that. That was, I think, really pivotal to our success is making sure you've got the right people around the table. And Tom, you said at the top of our conversation today, right, of like nonprofits don't have the luxury of building out these, enormous teams. We certainly didn't, in my experience. It was years in the making before I could get buy-in of hiring an internal admin that wasn't Blaine, right? Um, and so recognizing that as well, I think it's a really smart move for organizations that find themselves in a position like this to really think about what is the infrastructure that we need? And that infrastructure likely will and should evolve over time, right? So maybe it's more like mom and pop we've got an accidental admin or a team of accidental admins at the beginning, but how do we make sure we bring a partner in so we've got that sort of safety net? We've got that security of knowing if and when something breaks or needs updating, we've got someone who can handle it. And then we can taper that and evolve that relationship over time as we mature on the platform and gain more ownership as well. So I think that was a key part of the success for us, was like surrounding ourselves with the right people and the right team, and knowing that like you don't know what you don't know, like you said, Pete, earlier. And that is the biggest challenge. Like you don't know until you get into it.
Well, and I think, Blaine, you and I were both, sounds like we were both fortunate to be in organizations that got it, right? They understood. And if they needed a little encouragement, we were able, we've been able to accomplish that. But I think the key thing for organizations to understand, when I talk to other nonprofits who are either on the fence, had a negative Salesforce experience, or somewhere in the middle, is Salesforce is a big investment. No, I mean, it's the biggest line on most tech budgets, right? At least for our size organizations. But it's more than just paying the bill to Salesforce. I think that's the key part of empowering, supporting the accidental admins, is like, it's not just pay the Salesforce bill, pay Pete and Blaine's salary, and then we're good. There's partners, there's integrations, and you have to invest beyond the platform and really take a serious investment in your people. And in the nonprofit space, that's a normal thing. Our people are the most important part, right? We wouldn't be who we are without the people. But I think making sure that it's easy to see investing in program, investing in things in initiatives that fulfill the mission. Operational expenses are often a harder conversation to have. And that operational investment is not always the most natural conversation. But organizations that prioritize professional development, bringing in the right partners, and really empowering these admins, that's the key. I think that's, if nothing I say goes away from this podcast, that's the takeaway right there, is it's beyond just paying the Salesforce bill.
Sure. That's awesome. And so, Blaine, like, how does bringing in the right partner like a Provisio to help manage Salesforce and bridge those gaps between the business processes and the technology really help?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in so many different ways, right? Again, like we talked a little bit earlier about how I think in an ideal scenario, your partnership with someone like a managed services provider or implementation partner who transitions to that role for you um, will and should evolve over time, right? Like Pete, to your point earlier, Salesforce is one of the largest tech investments many nonprofits will make. And so, I think oftentimes we're remiss in thinking about our implementation projects as like one and done. We do it and then we set it and forget it. Works great. Everything tested and passed, we're good, right? But like actually go live is just the beginning for you. And so like how are we really thinking about how we sustain, how we maintain, and how we enhance and we improve upon what we've built? And that requires strategic thought partnership. To me, that's one of the number one things that a partner like Provisio can bring to the table here is like what do you not even know? Again, it goes back to like the theme of what we've been talking about. You don't know what you don't know with Salesforce, especially if you are finding yourself in an accidental admin position. This isn't something that you necessarily started out in your position doing. And so bringing someone to the table who can help you know that and say, hey, let's talk about your pain points. Let's talk about in your business processes. What's an opportunity for improvement? Let's talk about how you're making that connection between what are you trying to do strategically as an organization, and then what is on the horizon for opportunity in the technology platform. And bringing a partner to the table allows you to do that. At the beginning, in my personal lived experience, at the beginning, our managed services partner was there as a safety net. We knew that like Blaine did not know everything. Blaine was learning this on the fly, right? And I'm like, I need to make sure that we've got security in place. We brought a lot of key processes of our program into technology, which required a tremendous amount of trust, right? And it also required a tremendous amount of expertise, technical expertise on things that were well beyond sort of my purview. Right. And again, not just Salesforce, but also adjacent products that went along with it. And our implementation partner knew the ins and outs of all of that. One of the best the best examples that I can think of coming out of that Um, Pete, you talked about your implementation happened around the time of the pandemic, the onset of the pandemic. Mine too. We implemented in 2019, went live in 2019, planned a major launch of of our new application is what it was. It was a program application process, and a client portal that we were opening to the general public in March of 2020. Well, we know what happened in March of 2020, right? And I found myself in the exact same scenario that you described earlier of like, all right, well, we can say like, we don't know what's going on in the world right now. We just hold this, or we say everybody's at home, everyone's on their phone, everyone's on a computer. This is probably the best possible time that we could do this. And we did. And it was incredible. We had an incredible launch of the product and being able to welcome just a tremendous volume of new people into our program. And as a part of our launch process, we had planned this huge event. We were expecting thousands of people to come to this event not long after we went live. And the day before our event, which was an event really centered on recruiting people into our program, welcoming them in, letting them know how we could be of service to them, the day before the event, our application broke. And we were in a total panic, right? But I was able to like not put a support ticket in, not try to go in and tinker myself. I was able to make a personal call to our partner and say, this is urgent. We need you immediately. And they were able to jump in and fix it um, on the spot. And so, like, that's a great example to me of like, just being smart about your community that you're bringing to the table and knowing that you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You don't have to know all of the things, but you can bring others alongside and you should bring others alongside with you. And then over time, our partnership with our managed services partner was not the same. And that's healthy, I think. Still thinking about how do they help us drive our strategy forward, but they're not setting up a new user for me anymore. Right? They're not helping clean up duplicates in the system. They're not, fill in the blank. They're not doing break fix issue resolution or like tier one support necessarily, but they likely are doing more advanced support needs that arise on behalf of our team, where again we don't have the technical depth of like a developer and all of the very niche skill sets that we might need to be able to solve our problems. But also I think where the rubber meets the road is like really helping to think about, what do we not know about? What's a product or a feature that's something that was not even on our radar, but that you know us as a partner and that you might say, I want to bring an idea to the table for you to consider because I know that your goal next year is to serve 50% more families than you ever have before. And like to help get you there, here's a way that we could do this together. That I think is the most valuable opportunity that presents itself with a partner.
So Pete, and actually I want to get both of you guys' take on this. You both bring perspectives from different sides of the coin. Pete, you being from the client side, and Blaine, you being on the managed services partner side, right? What does it take for that partnership to be successful?
I would love to say this is my original thought. I put the ideas into Claude that brought out this original thought, but I'm working on a community presentation to answer that story right now. And the title is Rent the Brain, Hire the Heart. I'm not that clever. I wish I was, 'cause it's an awesome title. Because and how I got there was describing to Claude our various relationships with managed service providers, Salesforce ecosystem and not, right? And what it means to me is I can't teach every single person at Provisio or insert partner here um, about our organization. I can't teach them to care about it. I can't teach the mission. I can teach 1 to 2 people that, and I can and they're excellent tools. They know their expertise and they know our mission and they're able to communicate to these people. To kind of Blaine's point of being able to make that personal call and say, we need help and we need it now, right? Um, and you don't know what your help. You don't know do I need a developer? Do I need this? You don't know what you need. You just know you need help, and that's something that you can't replicate internally. And so I think the value for us is having that depth of bench, in knowing that you have a large group of people to call, and if they don't know the answer, they'll go find the answer. If they don't have the right person, they'll find the person. Um, so I think partners, as it is, it's a partnership, right? It's more than just a tool and a partner and go and make it happen. You got to have people that understand how to interact with that partner, how to feed the partner what they need. I mean, a partner is a big investment as well financially. And if you don't manage that partnership and give them the tools to succeed, it's going to be not a great line item on your budget. And you're going to start answering questions that really it's not the partner's fault if it didn't work. It's that they weren't supported. So that's what I've found to be successful with partners. The other thing I think is great, we had a partner years ago, and they were fantastic through implementation. And they came to us and said, "I think we've exceeded our value for your organization." They were humble enough to say, "We've had a really great run. We've done we've done all this together. The money you're spending with us, you're not getting ROI out of it. We think you should talk to these people, and we're here to support you through that transition. Where if you want to continue to pay us, we'll take your money." But they were humble enough to say like, this is not a good partnership anymore, and not because anyone did something wrong, but because you've advanced beyond what we're capable of. And I think that's important when you seek out partners to have those honest conversations. Because while they aren't your employees, they're a part of your team. And if you're not honest with them and forthcoming with them, it's not going to work well. And our team, Provisio and other partners, you know, my relationship with our PMs, with our different people, they become friends and colleagues more so than this third party partner, usually pretty quickly because you interact with them so often. So just taking that approach, I think, is big to success.
Pete, yes, amen to all of that. Yeah, you saw me just like, yes, yes, Pete. Um, you said something that really resonated with me because it was the number one thing I was reflecting on, Tom, when I heard your question, which is the partnership set up in a way that ensures that we are focused on driving high value work? Like, and unless it is, it's not going to work great, right? And that does require, Pete, I think to your point of like making sure, number one, you've identified the right partner for your organization. I think in my experience on both sides of this, I would say um, someone who understands what your organization does, and what your staff do and why it matters, and what the key considerations and constraints are that you're working within. And that's really the beauty of a partner like Provisio, where so many of us come from that space directly and bring that like lived experience that's like an invaluable, tangible to the partnership. It was something that it was really important to me. I know when I was on the client side of the relationship. In fact, we picked our partner specifically because the project manager and team that we'd be working with had experience working in the affordable housing space specifically. We were like, you get it. We don't have to explain our language. We don't have to bring you up to speed. You just know it. And so like that's worth more than anything that we could like find on paper. But I think focusing on high value work, it starts with having the right partner who's going to be able to bring the framework to understand what you're actually trying to do, that this is way more than like just tactical in the weeds, Salesforce changes, enhancements, fixes, whatever it may be. This is really about how are we tying all of that back to what you're trying to do organizationally, and does it matter? And are you advancing the most important things that your organization is setting out to do? Um, and that's where I think, again, there's so much opportunity there as long as we've got the right infrastructure in place. I do think one of the things that allows us to be successful in this manner on the client side of the engagement is making sure that we've got the right touch points with the right stakeholders at the right time in the partnership. And so what I mean by that is sometimes it's easy to say, especially through the perspective of an external admin, like, I'll just work with our managed services partner. We'll meet weekly or biweekly. We'll go through tickets. We'll just keep it moving. But Pete, you said this yourself of how are you demonstrating the value of this partnership? You as an external admin, you probably know it tangibly and you know it anecdotally, but can you quantify it? Can you tie it back to what really matters with your decision makers in the organization? So I do think one of the ingredients in the recipe for success here is making sure that we've got touch points with whoever those other stakeholders might be. Oftentimes, that might be executive sponsors in the organization, key decision makers who can help say, we're trending in the right direction in terms of what we're focused on. And if we're thinking about how we're sort of plotting the work that we're doing on a matrix, so to speak, right? Of like, are we in the quadrant of like, high effort, low impact? Or are we in the quadrant of like low effort, high impact? Or even high effort, high impact, right? Like, what are we doing that's driving our strategic objectives forward that we feel like we can demonstrate an ROI that's not questionable? Because the investment in a product like Salesforce is really only going to ever be realized when you've got that structure in place and you know that what you've implemented is growing and evolving with your organization. Pete, you talked about this at the beginning, like, the work that you all are doing at Hope Ignites that's evolved to some extent over time. At Habitat, it absolutely did. And the pandemic fueled that, right? Of being able to understand the needs of our community and adapting how we served them to meet the need better. And so your technology has to follow suit in that. And that requires thought partnership who can help you connect the dots on all of that. So I think like having those touch points is really important. So having the structure in place to make sure that you as an admin, if you're the one interfacing with your partners, excuse me, that you're able to bring in those stakeholders at the right time on the side, on your side, on the organizational side. Um, and then, I think that as we've talked about before as well, just transparency in general too. And Pete, you said this, like you're only going to get the most out of your partnership to the extent that you help your partner understand what you're striving towards. And so now on the partner side of things, I would say help us help you, right? Like share, for an example, share your strategic plan, right? I can't tell you how many of our clients that I work with will say like, hey, we're in the process of revamping our strategic plan as a side note, right? Send me a copy of that if you would. I'd love to know what you're working towards. Let's use that as a framework. And let's not think of these things disjointed, like that's operational and this is technology. No, this is designed to serve that purpose. And it'll only work that way if we've got that level of transparency and that true partnership. So we've got a space for ideation.
Awesome.
And so, final question to you on this subject, at least. What is your parting advice to an accidental admin who's listening right now?
You know, um, still I could spend the next 45 minutes talking about that, but the key thing is um, keep learning, never say no, but say, here's what it takes. I think the biggest thing I've learned is that Salesforce costs money, partners cost money, tools cost money, but people have a cost associated with them too, whether it's salary, you know, wellness, all that stuff is important. And making sure when you're talking to leadership, to stakeholders, Salesforce is a powerful platform. And every stakeholder could come up with 10 things that they would like to see in Salesforce. And they're all probably doable. But you as a one person, two person, small show, can't execute on all of that. And knowing that you can't, valuing your time and telling, your stakeholders, your leaders in extremely tough conversations. No one ever wants to say no. But sometimes it's okay to say no, but here's what we can do. Here's what it's going to take to do that. And kind of to Blaine's point earlier on, justifying building a team, building those use cases, all of that helps you when you go to bring in another person, another partner, whatever that case may be. Build your credibility all along by saying, I know this can be done. I know where my limits are. And for the health of our organization, I need to be happy. I need to be able to execute. And by the way, these are learned experiences. I'm not saying I was ever good at this. I'm still not great at it today. Um, but if I could go back and someone could tell me that 7 years ago, I think, that would have been good to hear.
I love that, Pete. I love that. I think the number one thing that comes to my mind is what you spoke to is just to stay curious. There's so much to learn. The ecosystem is vast and it is deep, and there is so much there to be able to absorb, and you don't need to absorb it all at once. And I think that takes me to like what is the most important thing that I would say I would share with someone who's finds himself in the situation that I have also been in, which is understand what matters most in the organization. Salesforce and technology at large, it's a means to an end for nonprofits, right? And like remember that. Remember that it's fun to drink the Kool-Aid. It's fun to get sucked into all the fancy gadgets and all the things that can be done, but it is a means to an end. And make sure that you're anchoring yourself in key performance measures, for example, understanding the metrics that matter to your executive team. What is your CEO reporting to the board on a quarterly basis, for example? How do you get yourself exposure to that if you don't have exposure today, depending on where you live in the organization? And anchor yourself in that as you're thinking about how you serve as a liaison for your internal team, how you serve as a liaison for your partners that you bring to the table. Think about how you are helping to champion what this technology can do for the mission.
Yeah, that's great. Well, one last thing before we go, Pete, I'm wondering, could you just tell us more about Hope Ignites and the amazing stuff that you guys are doing and how you're harnessing Salesforce to do all that?
Absolutely. I want to say one last thing on something that Blaine said that just resonated. 7.5 years ago, I had a very profound conversation with someone who said, when you start working in a nonprofit, your goal is to eliminate your job, right? Our goal is that in the long run, we don't want our organization to exist because we're addressing a systemic problem that theoretically, if it was gone, we'd all be excited. And I think that's a great way to approach. It's how I approach technology at Hope Ignites. I was talking to Melissa Hildees a year or two ago. I said technology will change nonprofits. Nonprofits that don't embrace it are not going to grow, and it will eventually stifle growth, and that's not something you want. And kind of how so Hope Ignites, we started as a residential program in 1977, one house in St. Louis. We spanned across the country over the last almost 50 years, different pathways, after school pathways. We've really evolved as an organization, but we're in a really, really pivotal moment. We're approaching 50 years, and we have a lofty but attainable goal to triple our impact by 2035. And I think tools like Salesforce, investments in technology, artificial intelligence, are all going to be keys to that. But our biggest key to success is going to be the investment in people. And I think that's kind of throughout this whole conversation, what resonates with me is like, I already knew that going in, the people are the secret sauce. But I mean, that's when you talk about Salesforce to advance using Salesforce to advance your mission, it's not about using Salesforce. It's about bringing in the right people and letting them use Salesforce, and giving them that tool.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you so much. This was really interesting for me, and I know for anybody who is an accidental admin going through the same challenges you guys did and are going through now, and Pete, in your case, sort of, very helpful advice for them to help navigate all that. So thank you so much for that. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Sparking Innovation. If you work for a nonprofit or a state or local government and are interested in how Provisio can help your organization manage its Salesforce instance through some managed services, contact us at provisiopartners.com, and be sure to subscribe to this podcast to catch the next episode of the show, which is going to be about the importance of for nonprofits to make the switch from NPSP to Agentforce nonprofits. And we're going to have a very special guest from Salesforce on to help drive that conversation. So keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for listening.